Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Better Call Saul Season 2. In this video, I'll be giving my overall review of Season 2 of Better Call Saul, so I'll have to give a spoiler warning for all of Season 2 of Better Call Saul. If you haven't seen all of Season 2, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, before I get into Better Call Saul, I just want to point out that my intro picture, which you might have noticed, has changed and it is now far better. This is the first time I'm using it, as it was sent to me yesterday morning by a fan who just threw this together for me, and I think it's awesome. So graphic design isn't really my thing. I don't really have programs or the time to do something like this. It was so great. So thank you to Joseph Samuel for sending this to me, which will now be my regular picture. So, getting to Better Call Saul Season 2, overall I think it was better than Season 1, but it followed a really similar structure where the first couple episodes were explosive and great and really got you into it, and then the last several episodes of the season were amazing punches to the face that contained some of the best drama you'll ever see. But the middle of the season was really slow paced, slow going setup. I wouldn't use the word filler, as I don't think anything in there was completely pointless. I just think it all served the overall function of setting up the main plot. However, I did feel that they stretched it out for far too long, and I did get the feeling that some of these mid-season episodes were purposely being stretched out in order to bide for time so the story didn't get too far ahead of itself. In other words, there were a lot of scenes in the mid-season that you'd expect to find in the deleted scenes section of the DVD rather than in the episode itself, and a lot of scenes that went on a bit too much longer than they really needed to. That being said, the overall structure of the season is a thing of beauty that really needs to be admired, as it was perfectly structured to tell an amazing and complex story of who Jimmy McGill is and the things he went through to become the person that we know he eventually becomes. So, if Season 1 was the story of Jimmy McGill striving to be a legitimate lawyer just like his brother, and how he looks up to his brother and admires him, only to learn that his brother has been actively working against him the whole time, Season 2 explores beyond that, as Jimmy no longer tries to be like his brother after that revelation, but still tries to be a legitimate lawyer for the woman he loves, Kim. But it becomes an interesting process for both of them as they learn to accept each other for who they are, and more importantly, Jimmy comes to terms with who he is. He realizes that he wouldn't be happy fully going back to being a sleazy con man, as ultimately that didn't work out for him, but at the same time he also isn't fit for being a full-on legitimate lawyer like his brother, as that life is not for him either. So it's him realizing that he can be happy, there can be a happy medium between the two where he stays in the law but practices it his way, and sort of combining the two elements of the lives that he's known. However, the conflict comes more into it when we explore more of Chuck's storyline, and we do get to know Chuck so much better in Season 2. We learn more of his backstory and Jimmy's backstory and the kind of history that they have together. The way this was explored was so layered, so complex, so realistic. It was absolutely amazing. So it's obvious that Chuck very much disapproves of Jimmy being a lawyer, and the main reason for this was explored in Season 1, where it's basically his pride, because the law is something he devoted his whole life to, something he had to work really hard for, and he feels Jimmy is just coming along, mocking it, treating it like the way he treats everything, by using shortcuts and skirting the rules on what is and isn't acceptable. So Chuck goes out of his way, despite his condition, to keep an eye on Jimmy as he works with HHM, and it's obvious Chuck is only doing it in order to keep an eye for Jimmy, and by keep an eye on him, I mean bring him down, because he's convinced Jimmy will do something illegal or wrong, and he just wants to be there to pounce on him when it happens. And to be fair to Chuck, he's right. He knows Jimmy well enough to know that he will do something to break or bend the rules that his law firm wouldn't look very kindly on. And also, to be fair to Chuck, the thing Jimmy did that got him in trouble had nothing to do with Chuck. It was Jimmy lying to his boss about a commercial he made. So Jimmy sabotaged himself with no help from Chuck at all. However, where Chuck was involved was with Kim, as she still worked with HHM, and so he still had access to her and could still affect Jimmy through her. So she gets punished, but then Chuck has to talk to her to make it clear that she's not to blame and that she won't be punished further, but sort of granted that she realizes what a fucked up person Jimmy is and to stay away from him. But when she refuses to heed this advice and quits HHM to partner up with Jimmy, this pisses Chuck off even more, and he tries some legal but shady practices in order to steal Kim's client away from her. And the main reason he does this is to get back at Jimmy, even though he won't admit it to himself. But he certainly wouldn't have tried this hard to prevent Kim from keeping this client if it wasn't for Jimmy. And then when Jimmy uses fraud and forgery to get the client back, Chuck gets so outraged and takes it to the next level and is now determined to destroy Jimmy, and even goes as far as resorting to the same kind of con man tactics that Jimmy would use. So we get some flashbacks that make it clear that Chuck is jealous of Jimmy, and that is his main motivation behind why he's going after Jimmy. He also holds resentment towards Jimmy because he blames him for the way that he treated his parents, and Chuck eyes Jimmy as a tendency to just hurt those around him and get away with it, as everyone still likes him because he's able to charm his way out of anything, which is the big reason as to why Chuck is so out to get him. So Chuck has been holding on to all this resentment, jealousy, and other hostile feelings towards Jimmy all these years, while Jimmy, for his part, has felt nothing but gratitude and admiration towards Chuck. In fact, he's gone out of his way to show it by taking care of Chuck all these years throughout his condition, so in that way Jimmy can come off as an innocent victim. However, it's not quite as clear-cut as that, as Chuck does have a point. Jimmy is incapable of operating in the confines of the law and will continue to do shady and backwards things because it's the only way he knows how to operate. And the shady and backwards things that he does can have negative effects on those around him, just like Kim was the one who suffered when Jimmy acted up at Davis and Maine. So Chuck does have a point about Jimmy, and I'm sure he's completely convinced himself he's in the right, but really it's not about Jimmy's shady behavior and more about his own petty feelings of inadequacy and the resentment he simply cannot let go of. So next, let's talk about Kim. She's actually appeared much more this season and was more essential to the plot. At the start of the season, with Jimmy losing his connection to Chuck, he reverted back to his con man status, but it was Kim who brought him back, and it was because of her that he tried to be a legitimate lawyer. However, at the same time Jimmy was trying to go straight and narrow for Kim, Kim was being seduced by Jimmy's dark side as she ran a couple of cons with him, and doing so only endured him more to her. However, she still wanted the straight and narrow for herself, but learned more to accept Jimmy for who he is. And we got a lot of her story this year as we followed her personal struggle to make a name for herself and her tough decision to leave HHM. And so when Jimmy offered to go independent together as partners, she counter-offered that they each run their own independent practice, but they share office together in order to cut down on expenses. That way she can accept Jimmy for who he is and allow him to practice law the way that he wants to without having to worry about it reflecting badly on her. And this, of course, wasn't ideal in Jimmy's eyes, but was better than nothing. And when she finds out he committed fraud to help her, she's totally not okay with this, and she was really pissed off at him for doing so, but sticks by him and quietly helps him to avoid getting caught. So I ultimately don't think she's endorsing this kind of behavior from him, but ultimately will stand behind him no matter what. So now let me get to the Mike storyline, which was pretty separated from the rest of the storylines, even more so than in Season 1. I did complain in Season 1 that Mike's storyline seemed kind of irrelevant, but for some reason it felt more natural this season. I probably just got more used to this kind of structure. So Mike's storyline hardly ever crossed paths with Jimmy's, but I do think they will cross paths again in the long term. And the two of them do kind of skirt and parallel each other, so ultimately I'm fine with it. And of course, the fact that Mike's storyline was so good this year, some people prefer it to Jimmy's storyline because it does more closely resemble Breaking Bad. But personally, I'm a fan of the Jimmy storyline because the character drama in it is just so awesome. That being said, the Mike storyline is really good, and Jonathan Banks is an amazing actor. So Mike's storyline this year was mainly about his trip to the dark side, because in Season 1 he cut ties from the police after killing his son's murderers, but he's not a full-on criminal and was just skirting the criminal life, but more importantly, he still refused to kill. So there were some lines he still refused to cross. And his journey this season is what will gradually change, that will change him to become the person that we know him to be in Breaking Bad, where he has no compunction about killing people. In fact, he will often recommend killing people. He's most well known for his no half measures speech that he gave to Walt, trying to convince him to kill Jesse. But in that case, he told a story about when he was a cop in Philadelphia, and that story was probably still weighing heavily on him during this time period. But he still refuses to cross certain lines. However, what happened this season, I think, is ultimately what changed that and turned him into the no half measures Mike that we know from Breaking Bad. And he refuses to kill Tuco at first as requested by Nacho, and instead comes up with a plan to get Tuco arrested. But that backfires on him when Tuco's uncle, Hector, shows up and threatens his family unless he changes his testimony so that Tuco gets off with a lighter sentence. So he's forced to do that, but tries to get back at Hector by ripping off one of his cartel couriers in an effort to get Hector arrested. But that backfires as well. Not only does it not work, but it results with an innocent bystander being murdered. So, the next thing, Mike finally decides that Hector needs to die. So I think this is where he learned that if he doesn't use full measures, then more people get hurt. But of course he doesn't kill Hector. Instead, this opens up another storyline for Season 3, but where that goes is pure speculation. My best guess would be it has something to do with how Mike gets involved with Gus Fring, but that's just pure speculation at this stage. However, the interesting contrast between Mike and Jimmy is that Mike is quite similar to Walter White, whereas he lets his pride get the better of him and that be his downfall. Because after Hector got him to retract his testimony, Hector considered the whole affair done, and he wouldn't have given Mike a second thought. But Mike let his pride get in the way and simply could not live with the fact that Hector got the better of him, which just led to more issues that wouldn't have happened had he simply let it go. Whereas Jimmy tried to explain to Mike that he's better off to just leave it alone and not stoke the fires. Now, to some people, and certainly to Mike, Jimmy's reaction here comes off as cowardly, which it is to a degree, but he's also smarter, as he totally correct. Staying out of it allows him to keep out of trouble, as ultimately it's Mike's pride that got that innocent bystander killed. What's more interesting to speculate on at this stage is what might happen next season, is how Mike and Jimmy's storylines might intersect. Because although we got a lot of character growth with Jimmy as he realizes he needs to be more of a sleazy type lawyer, and it didn't at all explore how he get involved with the criminal underworld, which we know by Breaking Bad times he is fully entrenched in. At this stage, he's still practicing elder law. He might have gotten the colorful suits and the tacky commercials, but he's still trying to be a respectable lawyer, and the criminal life is completely foreign to him. Well, not completely, as he's committed forgery and other crimes, but he isn't directly involved in drug dealing and money laundering laundering as he is in Breaking Bad, and that is what I think will be explored in Season 3, and I think this will happen with Mike's storyline intersecting back in with Jimmy's, because we saw this season that Jimmy felt a lot more alive when he was representing Mike or doing favors for him by representing that naive drug dealer guy. So I think he's going to realize even more that this is the kind of thing that really gets his blood pumping, and this is where he's going to lose Kim, because this is where she's not going to be able to follow him. And of course next year the situation with Chuck is going to get really explosive, as it's going to be all-out war between the two of them, and I'm convinced that this will end with Jimmy feeling just as sour to Chuck as Chuck already feels towards him, which will end with Jimmy getting the better of Chuck. However, it is possible that Kim will be a casualty in this war and might lose her license or something because of what Jimmy does, but maybe not. I could be wrong, it's just a guess. So, my rating for Better Call Saul Season 2 overall out of 10 is a 9 excellent. I very nearly gave this season a 10 as it was amazing. However, it did dip in quality during the mid-season slightly, and it moved far slower than it could have. And I do realize that slow pace has put a lot of people off. But overall, I still felt this season was amazing and told a really complex and extremely layered character story that contains some absolutely amazing and very well executed drama. I do appreciate that although it does seem unnecessarily slow at times, they are ultimately playing the long game here. I have complete faith in Vince Gilligan and the other showrunners after what they pulled with Breaking Bad that this will all pay off big time in the long term. Also, Breaking Bad had a similar structure where the first two seasons were kind of slow moving, but each season after gets more and more intense as the story really starts to kick in, and I have a feeling the same will happen here with each subsequent season of Better Call Saul will equally get more intense. And I hope this show also goes for 5 seasons, which I think would be a great arc for it. So that's it for my review on Better Call Saul Season 2. Be sure to check out my channel for many more reviews on other shows such as Game of Thrones as I cover Season 6 and all that comes with it, as well as other shows such as Star Trek, Fear the Walking Dead, Orphan Black, and more. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.